Meet Zahir. The conference room is silent as he's clicking through his slides. As director of global supply for an international tech company, he's presenting a new strategy to unify all operations across 3 continents. The numbers are solid, but he can feel the energy in the room slipping away. Eyes are drifting to cell phones. There are some polite nods, but no spark. Zahir knows his team is very talented, but they're also stretched thin. He came to this meeting committed, determined to inspire his team, but his voice seems to be falling flat. The numbers are overwhelming and making for a very heavy presentation, and he doesn't feel much of a connection. And Zahir's frustrated by this. He grew up in Karachi, got his MBA in London, and is known for solving complex problems. But the one problem he can't solve is figuring out how to inspire his team. After the meeting, Zahir is lingering by the window overlooking the city, and he keeps thinking to himself that strategy alone won't motivate them, that he needs to figure out how to capture their hearts as well as their minds. Today, I'm speaking with Russ Peterson Jr., co-founder of iSpeak, an award-winning communication coach who has trained leaders across the world on how to influence through powerful storytelling. Russ helps professionals to move beyond bullet points to crafting messages that truly resonate and delivering presentations that inspire action. And I'm excited to hear how Russ would help someone like Zahir to go beyond his data-driven updates to telling stories that really resonate and inspire action in his team and something that they can truly rally behind. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Russ, one thing I read about you that I wanted to start off by asking you is that you are a student of communication. Now, whenever I hear something like that, I think there has to be a story behind that. Like, what led to you becoming a student of communication?
Yeah, now there is a story behind it. If you probably know who Zig Ziglar is.
Oh, yeah, he's one of my favorites, Russ.
Yeah, so he's no longer with us. He's passed away. Yeah, but I would consume a lot of books when I was younger, high school, college. And Kevin Karshnick, who I know have interviewed recently, he and I went to a Zig Ziglar event. Zig got up on stage and spoke for about 2 hours, nonstop, no breaks. And the entire crowd of thousands was ready to run through a brick wall for him at the end of it. And it fascinated me, and I was too. Here's what fascinated me is no PowerPoint, no slides, just Zig on the stage using words, body language. That's about it. 2 hours. And we were not bored to tears trying to get on a phone, which they didn't exist back then, the smartphone. But he had us ready to do just about anything for him. And what fascinated me was, how did he do that? Words and body language. And that's really all he used. And the tone of his voice. I call it the visual, the verbal, and the vocal. Those were the only tools that he used to get an entire audience that worked up and ready to do something. And so I became, at that moment, is when I became a student of communication, because I said, there's got to be, I tend to be an engineering thinker. I've got a marketing degree, but I do think like an engineer. I like to build things. I like to take things apart. And I wanted to take that apart and say, what did he do and how did he do that? And I became a student of communication. And here's what I've started doing. And since that time, this was 35, 40 years ago, at least. No, 35. I started spotting patterns. There are patterns in communication. And some patterns get replicated all the time and they work. And some people repeat patterns and it doesn't work. And so I wanted to find all the patterns that worked. And so I've been discovering patterns ever since that.
It's funny you say that. I was just thinking about patterns this morning. I was thinking about how that's how my mind is naturally wired. It is, I'm always looking for the pattern. Yeah. I'm always looking for some consistency and being able to then create a formula from what's producing a positive result.
Do you know why?
Tell me.
I think all humans look for patterns to some extent, some more than others. I think you and I fall into that category, but it's cause and effect. All humans, when they see something happen, our initial assumption is something caused that. And so we see items that are linked together, and that's just one link. Cause and effect is one link. But when you start to chain together multiple, now you discover the patterns. So I think all humans are somewhat wired to look for cause and effect. If something happened, we will naturally look for it. Here's a quick example. I'll give you a quick example. So picture this. If I showed you a picture of, let's say, a piece of fruit, like an apple, okay? In the very next picture, I show someone that's holding their stomach and they look obviously sick. What would you immediately think if I said, is there a story here? What is this? What would you do?
Yeah, the story would be that the apple made this person sick. Yep. They ate the apple and it made them sick.
Yep. And I prompted you by saying, is there a story here? But even if I didn't say, is there a story here? Most humans would see those two pictures in succession and say, I think he or she ate that apple and it made them sick. We naturally do this. We're always looking for a cause and effect with everything that we see around us. And if we see something happen, I think we have a natural curiosity to figure out what that is. But then, like I said, that's just one cause and effect. When you start to see multiples and they're all linked together, that's when you spot patterns. And patterns are extremely important, I think, to all of us, especially in communication, because we as humans, if we don't stop to reflect on how we're communicating with others, we will tend to repeat those patterns that don't work. And what we want to do is focus on the ones that do work. And how can I construct better patterns for how I communicate with other people?
And of course, this is all so that anyone listening could not just be a better communicator, just to be a better communicator, but that would then lead them to, let's say, a career advancement or being a more successful entrepreneur, if that's the path that they're going down, or if it's to be able to lead others in a way that makes a greater impact. Yes. And I know that those are the things that you care about quite a bit. So, Russ, what are some of the patterns that are stopping people from being good communicators or good influencers?
So rather than a pattern, let me start you with this. Okay. That one thing that holds people back is the filter, and much psychology. Everyone's familiar with different types of biases. And some people just call them filters, and how we filter everything around us. But all of us have a natural inclination to focus on self first. There's nothing wrong with that, because we as humans need to keep ourselves alive. And so it's programmed into us to stay alive. That's one of the number one goals of the brain up here is do what you need to do to stay alive. But playing everything through that filter, if we don't understand that the first filter everything's going to go through is, how does this affect me? How does this apply to me? You have to make a conscious effort to use a different filter. And I'll give you the filter that I begin all my workshops with now. And it's a 3-piece filter. I call it the priority stack. And the easier way to remember this is I call it the AMY model. AMY, AMY. And so A is on top, Y is on the bottom. But A stands for audience, M stands for message, and Y stands for you, the speaker. If you think about that as a filter for everything you do when you communicate, you're going to be setting yourself up for success much better than if you don't. So do you see what's in the first position? It's the audience. Everything you do, and I know we're going to talk about Zahir later, but this is the first thing that I would give to him. You got to start with your audience. Audience is the most important thing. Second most important is the message that you build for that audience. And then you, the speaker, are in not last place, you're in third position. I tell people, don't think I'm putting you in last, because there's many other things that you could prioritize below you, but the top 3 priorities: audience, message, and you. And so here's how I connect, or the next question I ask, I say, notice where you are, notice where the audience is. And it's a simple question, but what connects you to the audience? What's the one in the middle? It's the message. And so it's so simple, but I want it to be a profound awakening when they see that, to say, okay, so it's all about the audience, and the way that I engage and connect with that audience is through my message. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
I remember,
the filter you got to start with.
I love it. I remember years ago, I was in a group with other trainers. These were people who went around the country just facilitating workshops, and one of them was speaking to a group, and one of the leaders said, well, I really get nervous, I really get anxious when I speak. And his response, I'll never forget it, he said, oh, so you're selfish. And I'm like, I was like, and the guy's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're making it all about you, aren't you? I mean, your fears, your anxieties are what you're focusing so heavily on, that you forgot about what's number one on your priority list, Russ, and that is the audience. Yes.
That's so good. That's so good. I have used this when people come to me and they say, I have the nerves and the anxiety, and I don't know, I speaking in public just really gives me the anxiety. I will not necessarily, I like that. They'll call them selfish.
It's a little harsh. Yeah.
It is. But that'll wake them up. In that same vein is, I will suggest to them, if you were having a house, like a party at your house, not a huge party, but you're going to have about 10 guests are going to come to your house. What do you do when they show up at your front door? And I just let them walk me through it and say, well, I'll invite them in, and I'll take their coat, or I'll ask them if they want something to drink, and I'll show them to the living room or something. I said, exactly. And I said, when you are speaking, this is your house right now, and these people are coming to your house. Take care of them. And it doesn't mean you have to go to every person, say, what would you like to drink? But the point is, just give them an image. I want to give them an image where they see themselves as a hostess, someone who is taking care of and serving the people in the audience. I love what that person, whoever what that was that gave that feedback, because when you shift that focus and get them thinking about the audience, the anxiety naturally comes down, because I'm thinking more about them than I am about me.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you went there, because it's the focus on self that becomes the problem. It becomes where I'm so absorbed in me that I forget about the audience or the message. And that's why my communication falls apart. How do you help people to focus less on them? I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Because it is a natural part of being human, which is to really keep your attention on your own survival, protecting yourself. Obviously, the better performance is when you're focusing on others. But what's the bridge to get there, Russ?
Yeah. So I have a preparation process that I take them through. So first we give them that awareness that it's not about you, it is about the audience. And so let's focus on the audience for a moment. And then I walk them through a series of questions to ask them about the audience. And anyone who's taken any presentation skills class type before, you've already been taught this, where they say, oh, you need to plan for your audience and think about who is your audience, who are you speaking to, and why are they showing up? And it's really that same set of questions. But when I deliver it to someone, I want to take them to a deeper level of realization to understand that right now, nothing else matters. Your slides don't matter. Your message at this point doesn't even matter, because I need to know about the humans that are going to be placed in your care and what they want to get, where they want, what they want. And we do need to talk about what you want to get out of this as well, but we need to join those two and marry those up. And so I spend time planning. We have to plan this out. And I talk about moving them from point A to point B. So this is the simple way that I will describe it, is that you always want to get your audience from where they are today to where you want them to be tomorrow. And Zahir's story, when we get to it, that's exactly what he was attempting to do, is I want to move them from here to here. And so you start by defining your goal. You've heard this before. I think Drucker is accredited with this quite often, but start with the end in mind. So we want to set a goal. No, none of your listeners are going to say that's new to them. We've all done that. Yeah, set a goal. What's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? I want to accomplish this, 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 and this. And I said, that's great. Now let's talk about the audience. What do they want? And if we haven't talked about what they want, here's the example I'll give when we talk about truly moving them from point A to point B. Once we define the finish line of where we're going, this is where we're going. We define that. Here's this story that I'll often use in my workshops. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas. Lived there almost my whole life, lived in Houston for 8 years because everyone has to do their time in Houston. And so I came back to the Austin area and now I live in the Austin area. But let's assume that my wife is in downtown Austin. And for whatever reason, solar flare or something, but the GPS is not working on her phone. It's not working in the vehicle. She's in downtown Austin somewhere and she's lost. She calls me. I'm at home. I live in Round Rock, which is just north of Austin. And she gets on there and I can hear it in her voice. Her voice is shaking and she's saying, Russ, I'm in Austin and I'm lost. I'm a little scared. I don't know where to go. I don't have any GPS. I don't know this town as well as you do. I need you to give me directions on how to get home. And then I look at my audience, and Jay, I'll look at you right now. What's my first question for her?
Where are you? What do you see?
Where are you? Yeah, where are you? Now, granted, she's lost, right? So she can't tell me exactly where, but I would ask her that. I would say, where are you right now? Is there a street sign? Is there, I know the buildings downtown. Are there some buildings that look very unique right around you? But where are you, babe? Now, let's assume that she tells me where she is. I know exactly where I could get her home very quickly. But let's assume that we do this instead. Same scenario. She calls me. I'm lost. I'm a little frightened. You need to give me directions on how to get home. And I say, stop. Don't tell me another word, babe. We're going to play a little game here. I'm going to start giving you some directions on how to get home. I don't know where you are right now, but we're going to have some fun with this. And I start giving her directions. And eventually, it's not that hard to get from Austin to Round Rock. Eventually, we would figure it out, right? And she would get home. Now, let's assume that happened. I'm standing in the kitchen. She comes in through the garage, which comes right into our kitchen. And when she walks out, I go, hey, you're home. I said, that was fun, wasn't it? What kind of a greeting do you think I'm going to get from her?
It's not going to be very pleasant.
No. She might come and slug me in the arm and say, don't you ever do that to me ever again. Now shift that back to her calling me. And I ask her the question that you came up with. Babe, where are you? And she describes it. And I say, I know exactly where you are. I can get you home in 3 turns. It's that simple. I need you to go here, then here, then here. She would get home, first of all, much faster, correct? She would get home much quicker than playing that game the other way. And think about how she would feel in both scenarios. She comes walking in through the garage. I'm in the kitchen. And I say, you're home. What kind of a greeting do I get this time?
Oh, you're going to get a much more loving and pleasant greeting.
She's going to give me a big hug, tear coming down. She's going to kiss me on the cheek and say, I love you so much. Thank you for taking care of me. Take care of your audience. How do I do that? Well, you set a goal for this is where I want to get my audience to, my destination. In my story, it was home. This is where I want to get them. The logical question is, where are they right now? What do they currently know and understand or think they know and understand about this subject that we're going to talk about? And the vital, vital question here is, how do they feel about it right now? Because the feeling plays a huge part in the decision that they're going to make. And then think about at the end, when they reach that finish line, how do you want them to feel? I gave you 2 very different scenarios based on how I delivered a message to my wife. And I got 2 very different feelings from her. You've got to set point A properly. You've got to know where your audience is, and then you have to meet them there. And I'll share one last thing here on this subject about what John Maxwell has talked about so many times, where he says, you've got to meet people where they are. A great leader meets the followers where they are. And so if you set up a point A and a point B, you know where you want to get them to as a finish line, and you've defined very well where they are today, like what they know and understand and how they feel about it, then the speaker has to go to them and recognize that. What does that sound like? You've seen speakers do this before. They'll say something like, I know that with the Alpha Project and the current obstacles that we've run into right now, that all of us are extremely frustrated, and we can feel the weight of the critical nature of this because we got executive eyes watching us every day. Do you see how the speaker, just met them right where they are? They're sitting there in their seats going, yep, that's exactly how I feel. You got to tap into that, right? Meet them at the beginning. And what you've just done, if you'll picture this as my metaphor, if you've been to Europe before, or any of your listeners been to Europe, you know what a platform looks like, or even New York or Chicago, but a platform with a train. You got them not only to the platform. If you do something like that, you're going to get them on the train. Now they're on the train. Now they're ready for the message. And that's the rest of the trip.
I love it. And Russ, I think even having the exchange to highlight, okay, here's the circumstances, asking the audience, how does everyone feel about that? Like, have them come back. Like, that's a good way to connect too, right? To be able to say, like, okay, you're there. What's that like right now?
Mm-hmm.
And creating that safe space for everyone to discuss it, not in a way that you're asking everyone to vent and make it a big complaining session. It's more of taking inventory of, okay, this is where we are right now. Let's have a minute or two here. It doesn't have to be very long, but let's talk about it. Yeah. Let's be real about it. So then we can leave that station. And so in Zahir's case, we could touch on it a bit here. Yeah. How does he go about that? Because in a corporate setting, it's like, okay, you have a team and you want to meet them where they are. Mm-hmm. What would be the direction that he would need to take to be able to learn where they are?
So here's where I would start with him. I was teaching a workshop one time on influence, and I asked at the beginning of the class, meeting them where they are, and I said, what do y'all want to get out of the class today? And I still remember one manager said, I just want people to do what I tell them to do. And so, wouldn't we all? No. But it reminded me of Zahir didn't do that. From his story, he didn't do that, but it crossed my mind that is something he could have done because he's the leader. So here's where I start, people. You have to think about when you attempt to influence others, there's a big difference between influence and manipulation. But the reason why sometimes they will get confused is that they often use the same tools, but they don't use them for the same reasons. So a big difference between influence and manipulation is simply this. Who benefits from this? Because it's a change. You want a change to happen. That's you would influence them toward a change. If the audience, remember our Amy model, if the audience is going to benefit from this, you're influencing them. If the speaker alone benefits from this, the audience does not. And in the worst cases, the audience actually gets harmed in the process. That's manipulation, in my opinion, pure evil. We're not talking about that. We're talking about influence, which is quite noble. Influence is a mentor or a coach. It's someone who can lead you to a place you didn't even know you had the ability to go to, but they encouraged you and they got you to go there. So you took a step that you really wouldn't have done on your own, but it took that coach who believed in you to influence you and to step you off in that direction. When it comes to influencing others, if you'll picture 4 quadrants here, all right, and so you have these 2 axes, you got the x-axis and the y-axis. If the x-axis, so the horizontal one here, on your far right, they do it, all right? After this, they actually do what you asked them to do. On the other side, the left side, they don't do it. And of course, we don't want to end up over there. And then toward the top, so our y-axis, at the top, we've got how they feel about it, and it's positive feelings. And down at the bottom, it's negative feelings. All right. So the y-axis is feelings, positive, negative. X-axis is do it or don't do it. If you can picture that, in the upper right-hand quadrant, you've got they did it and they feel really good about it. That is, of course, is where Zahir, I think, would want to go. Mm-hmm. When I ask leaders, which one of these quadrants you want to end up in, they'll pick that one. I would too. It's like, that makes sense. That's where I'd like to be. We call that commitment. The audience is committed. Now, here's why I bring this up now, because right below that one, they do it, but they don't really feel good about it. That's called compliant. And here's the danger for leaders like Zahir and me and you as leaders, you have what's called formal authority. It's one of the three power sources. The three power sources of influence are formal authority, logic, and relationships or feelings. That first column, that first power source of formal authority, if you have formal authority, we as leaders know that we could play that card. Do it. Why? Because I'm the boss and I said so. Now, I hope that we're not doing that. But if we're all willing to be transparent, we will admit that we've done that at times. Why? Can you think of a reason, Jay, of why would a leader choose to say, just do it, just get it done? Like, what would be why wouldn't they choose a different path? What's one of the main reasons you think?
There's a few things that come to my mind. It could be pressure. They're under a lot of pressure. It could be because they just want it quick and they want it easy and they don't want to take the time. Yeah. Those are the first two that come to my mind.
Yeah. And those first two, I would argue, are almost the same bucket. Why are they feeling the pressure? You said the first one, they're feeling a lot of pressure. It could be a time constraint is part of the pressure. Could be, right? It is often exactly what you said, that if you have formal authority, it doesn't take that much time to play that card and say, just get it done. But I think we would all agree that if we had a manager or a leader that was constantly playing that card with us, that would start to grate on us a little bit. And we would start to feel more like a resource as opposed to a real human on a team. So just to fill out the quadrants, just so you know the names of the others, the upper left where they feel good about it, but they don't do it, is called consider. They'll think about it, but now it's usually timing or budget. Yeah, we want to do that, but we're going to have to wait till next quarter. We don't have the budget right now or something like that. So they consider it. And then lower left is conflict. And we don't want to end up there. They don't do it, and now they feel really negative about it. So understanding those four quadrants, if we want to move toward commitment is going to take time, and it also takes some planning. That's when I take them into the Amy model, and I'll have them walk through, tell me about your audience, tell me where they are right now. Once we've done that, then we need to move into, okay, we're attempting to influence. So let's think of influence as a sale. We're selling. We're selling an idea here. And we want, we're selling a new future, and we want them to step into it, whatever that might be. When we're influencing and we're selling, every sale is two sales. Now, I have a marketing degree. I've been in sales and business development my entire career. And I learned this very early on. And I'm so thankful that I did, because I had this so wrong. When I'm attempting to speak to someone else and sell to someone else, I didn't realize that what I was attempting to do is truly trying to solve their problem. I thought it was more of a game, and I had to come up with the right, they have an objection. I got to come up with the right comeback to their objection. Yeah. And it's not chess. You're not playing chess or checkers with them. You're trying to stand shoulder to shoulder, not toe to toe. You're trying to assist them in solving their own problems. So when we think about that, then we have to think about, what are the two sales that would get someone to move? Well, the first sale is the need to change. If they don't believe that there's any reason to change or to do something different, they'll make no attempt to do it. So once you sell them on that, then we can sell them on the next step. And the next step is the solution. Too often a salesperson will step in assuming that the first sale has already happened, and they just try to sell the solution. Here's why: when you get an inbound lead, if you're a salesperson, if you get an inbound lead, here's the benefit and the beauty of that. In marketing, they'll say that they're warm or they're qualified and they're more likely to buy. You know why? Because they've already made the first sale. They know they have a problem, an issue, right, something that needs to be solved, and they're seeking a solution until they come to here. Now, here's one thing I'll give to all your listeners. If you have any sales or business development people out there, I'll give them one caution. So you get an inbound lead and you think, oh, perfect. First sale's already done. I just need to focus on the solution. I would highly recommend that you go back and inspect what they came up with as their need, because there's a business need and then there's a need for what they think is the solution. If they come to you and they've already spec'd it out, and they say, hey, here's what I need a quote on, and they tell you, I need this many servers and this is, or whatever it is that they're selling, they've already decided this is how I'm going to solve that problem. The way that the business development people out there can bring high quality and get to that trusted level. We always want to be the trusted advisor, to our customers, as opposed to just a salesperson, is you go back and just review with them the business need and see if you think of them as their own doctor and you as a doctor, do you come to the same diagnosis? And do you see the prescription that now they're looking for? So don't just take orders. It sounds like it'd be simple and easy, but you may get it wrong because they may have not diagnosed it properly.
Yeah.
That brings value to them.
Yeah. And I think the sales approach, the sales mindset, which is sometimes people say, well, I'm not a salesperson, right? If they're not in that role. I always challenge people. Because we are always selling. As a leader, you're selling. You're selling an idea. You're selling yourself. You're selling a new strategy. And Zahir would need to learn how to be a better salesperson. And I like the way you worded it, a trusted advisor, by first understanding the needs of his people. And then another thing that I know would help Zahir, and you have a lot of experience you put into your workshops, is being able to frame it in the form of a story. You've already shared a number of great stories here that create imagery. I saw your wife there, lost in the streets of Austin, and it made it so much more memorable. It's going to be retained for me going forward. So talk to me a little bit about storytelling, Russ, and how someone like Zahir could leverage storytelling to be able to really motivate and inspire his team.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And we as humans, as much as whether we want to admit it or not, whether we know it or not, we think in stories, because it goes back to that cause and effect. A story is taking data and information and stringing it together in a way that you've created that link chain we started with today about causes and effects. Now, there are different ways to construct those stories and put them together, and there's certain elements every story needs to have. So I'll start with the simplest form of every story has these three elements. I said that in the class one time, and somebody said a beginning, middle, and an end. And I was like, very good. They do. They have a beginning, middle, and an end, unless it's the very first of the Lord of the Rings. I did not realize it was that they were going to have like 3 movies or Lord of the Rings. I went and saw that first one, and it ends, and I'm like, okay, that's not an ending. A beginning, a middle, and an end is one thing, but let me give you these 3 things. Every story, this means in business as well, every story has a hero, a want, and an obstacle. If you think about any movie that you've ever seen, when you first start watching a movie, they try to just paint that picture quickly so that we can figure out what's going on here and what is this movie going to be about. And so you'll get introduced to some characters, and it's usually the protagonist gets introduced at the very beginning. Not always, but often we'll get introduced at the beginning, and we understand, okay, so there's the hero. What do they want? What is changing? Either something has changed in their life, or they're trying to create a change or something, but they want something, and there's usually something standing in the way, an obstacle they have to overcome. So like climbing a mountain of some sort. If you want to make it very interesting, then you'll pull a George Lucas and you'll throw a Darth Vader in there, and you have a villain who's actually fighting against the hero to prevent them from accomplishing whatever it is that they want to accomplish. But this applies not just to action movies or sci-fi, it applies to rom-coms also. Picture this, just any rom-com that you've ever seen starts off with, let's say there's a gentleman walking down the street and he's going in to get his morning coffee before he goes to work. And there's a new barista working here today, and he finds her quite fetching. And he looks at her and he notices the name tag on there. And he's thinking we know what he's thinking. He's like, wow, I wouldn't mind having a cup of coffee with her. And then all of a sudden you see that she steps away from the cash register and can't take his order right now because she has to go talk to her boyfriend. And the boyfriend, as he's observing, looks like he's acting like a jerk to her. And he's thinking, if she was with me, I'd never treat her like that. But now, so there you go. You got your hero. And I'm assuming it's the person who went in to get a coffee. And what does he want? He would like to establish a relationship with this person that he just met. And what's standing in the way? Well, it's the boyfriend who's kind of a jerk. So my point is this: there's always this hero, want, and obstacle. For Zahir, it's the same thing. He needs to figure out who's the hero, what do they want, and the obstacle. Go back to the Amy model that we had earlier, I would tell Zahir, do not make yourself the hero. Remember, you're in third position. Who's in first position? The audience. Okay, so Zahir, can you guess who I'm going to tell you to make the hero? And he's going to say, it's my audience. Yes. And he's going to say, well, I don't know how I can do that because they're if you want to say the workers, they're going to get this job done and they don't really want to do this, but I know we need to do this. And so I'm trying to convince them, get them on board so that they do this. If there's no purpose behind it that they can buy into, they're not going to be, as he said in his message, inspired. He wants them to be inspired. Well, then you need to give them something inspirational to grab onto. Why is this project inspiring to the audience? Now, he could think of it from his standpoint, because remember, he's in third position and that it's important, but his goal is not the only goal. He's got to have his audience and they have to have a goal that they can grab onto. And so I'll give you 2 ways to look at this to make your audience the hero. Number 1, go back to what we said earlier about all of us are selfish at some level. And what we mean by that is we are thinking about, how does this impact me? So if I picture his team and he's sharing information about this new project, this new direction, he's got good data, strong data, and wants them to move in this direction, the first thing they're going to do, like all humans, are they're going to tie that to themselves. Okay, so what does this mean for me? Do I have time to do this? I don't know how to do that. Do we have the tools to do that? They're going to apply this to themselves. Now, knowing that gives us as speakers an advantage because we know everyone's going to do that. Okay, so then knowing that they're doing that, how can I craft the story so that it is something that they see themselves in one place and they see how I'm going to get them to a new place? So that's the first thing, is get them to think about how this impacts them. Here's the second way that you can make them the hero, is get them to think about the audience or the ones who are being served by the project that we're completing. The quick example I can give you on that is if I said, Jay, we're going to go outside and I've got a pile of sand that was just dropped off here by a dump truck. I've got lots of shovels. I've invited a few people. We're going to fill sandbags for the next 4 hours. You'd be like, what? I'm like, come on, let's go do it. And you might do it because I asked you to do it. And if I was your boss, you'd do it because I told you to do it. But you're wondering, this is not very fun. If I said all these sandbags are getting loaded on a truck and they're taking them out to the hill country in Texas because they're expecting more floods. And these sandbags are going to be used to protect an orphanage. That we're getting the people out, but we don't want the building to get flooded. I just gave you a purpose outside of yourself, and you would say, where's the shovel? You would want to get started with that right away. So the 2 ways that you get your audience to play the role of the hero is, number 1, you make them the hero of they've got their own lives, they've got their own stories, they've got their own careers. How does this impact each and every one of them individually? We do that. And sometimes we tie it to the greater purpose outside of this. For Zahir, I don't know who his customers are, but the thought would be, how does this project benefit others? And is there a purpose or a core value behind it? Something that you believe in, something they believe in, something your company believes in? Just like, what are you doing? It may not be saving an orphanage, but every company has a mission, right? They need to have a mission. So whatever your mission is, if you're working there, chances are you believe in the mission of what we're doing here. So tie it to that. So those are the 2 ways I would say he's got to make them the hero first.
What I think, from what I'm hearing, Russ, if Zahir or anyone else listening can incorporate both those things,
yes,
then you're hitting a sweet spot, right?
Yes. Yep. That's so good.
Right. Because I thought of the radio station, WIIFM.
Yeah.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me?
So many people hear that, and
Yeah.
I think that's powerful and it's necessary. What I also know is that when you can tie the activity into something, as you said, that's a purpose bigger than yourself, that's meaningful, that motivates people, that inspires people. And sometimes it's a little hard to connect those dots. Depends on what it is, right? If it's, some product launch where you can't really find something, I would understand where a leader would say, well, I can't really force it. So don't force it. Don't pretend, don't make something up.
Nope.
But if it's there, and you can tie it, please do. I just did recently I did a talk for a company where we tied it through the core values the way you just described.
Yeah, that's good.
Where I put the core values up on the screen and I said, which of these mean the most to you? Mm-hmm. And I had them tell me what was the most relatable, what was the most impactful, and then tying the story to how what it is we're talking about relates to those core values. So there could be a way if it really aligns with the message.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Zahir, he has this struggle, and I can hear people listening saying, well, I'm just not someone who's a natural motivator. I'm not someone who has that natural charisma. What would you say to someone who has that concern that this is not something that comes to them so naturally, Russ?
Yeah. It's when I think about natural, like someone has a natural charisma, I agree. There are some people they naturally do, but it's also a skill that can be learned, and it can be improved in each and every one of us. So I look at it as talent and skill. And here's what I mean by that. People who have talent, and this is just my definitions. To me, I think of that as natural. Derek Jeter has some natural talent as a baseball player. If I was on the same team's little league growing up and I did all the same things that he did, would I be as good as Derek Jeter? No. Would I be a better baseball player than I am today? Yes. But I would not. Why? Because he had some natural talent, some God-given talent that he had, and I don't have that. And so it's the same thing when people say, I don't have that natural charisma. That's fine. I will tell you some of the greatest speakers I've had the privilege of coaching and working with over the decades. Some of the best ones are natural introverts, and they don't like talking in front of large crowds. And so there are many reasons why that could be. So if you don't have that natural charisma, let me just say some of the best speakers I've ever coached, and I'm talking all the way up to the C-suite level. They fall into that same category as you, not you, Jay, but your listeners. If that's what they're thinking, that you can, if you have the tools working. So I haven't even given the tool yet, but I've got a tool that I want to give for just laying out a natural story. So I want to make sure we have time to do that. Can I give that now?
Absolutely. I would love to hear it. Yes.
Okay. So I'm all about tools. I tell people all the time that there's not rules in communication. There's tools. And it's up to us, the user of the tool, to understand how to use the tool effectively. If you've ever worked with power tools like woodworking or something, you can hurt yourself if you don't know how to use them properly. And you can also create things that don't look like they're supposed to look like because you don't know how to use the tools. So you've got to know how to use the tools, and then you have to know when to use each tool.
Right.
Same thing with woodworking. It's like, how do I get this to do this? It's like, well, you need this type of tool. It's like, what is that? And like, let me show you how to use that tool. And it's used just to solve this problem. It's like construction. Communication is the same way. You've got to increase your toolbox, and you got to know how to use them and be comfortable with it and when to use them. So the one I'm going to give you is one that we lay out, and it's for influencing change. And this is a model that takes that problem solution that I talked about, establishing the need to change, and then giving them the solution. Many of your listeners have heard of this already. It's called problem solution. That's at a very high level. Let's break that down a little bit further. I want to break it down to 5 major pieces. And if you listen closely, you might break it down even into 7. So here's the first piece, is that you give the audience a headline. The headline gets their attention. But here's the second thing that it does, is it gains their interest. There's a big difference between just attention and interest. Here's the quick example. Bill, one of our instructors, uses this one. I love it. You're walking out of the grocery store and you look toward general direction, toward where your car is located, and there's a car alarm going off. Does the car alarm get your attention? It does. It's coming from the general direction where my car is. Then you see some other car, random car, not yours, and the lights are blinking on it. Are you still interested? Maybe not. I mean, not all of us are Batman and we're going to jump in and like, hey, someone's trying to steal that car. But the point is this: it got your attention. Just like I could clap my hands, that would get your attention. But then as soon as you realize that I just clap my hands for no reason, I don't no longer have your interest. So a headline should gain their attention and their interest. How do I do that? Go back to the audience, meet them where they are. They're the hero of this story. And so you've got to give them something that grabs their attention right at the beginning. Zahir could say something to them and recognize where they are right now. I'm making this up. After we completed the Genesis project, each and every one of us was proud that we had accomplished it on time, but I know that we also had some nervousness about this project. So now I just got their attention. They're like, yeah, I kind of did, but I'm wondering what Russ has to say about the nervousness, and say that nervousness was not unfounded because and then I go into, and I set up what we learned from the last one. So the second piece is really getting into the problem. And if you want to think optimistically, if your listeners are more optimistic than pessimistic, it could be an opportunity. This is the reason to change. There's a problem that I need to make the audience aware of, or there's an opportunity that we have right here in front of us. And so we establish that. And sometimes people will call this segment, this second piece here, the what and the so what. What is it? It's a problem or it's an opportunity. But the so what is, why should I care about that? And here's what the great speakers will do. Zahir will tie it back to each and every one of them individually. Why? Because we know that deep down, we're all thinking about ourselves just a little bit. So tie it to the individuals themselves in that group. We all want to be able to not only accomplish this on time, but we would like to be recognized at the annual, awards dinner or something when they call out the team of the year. We know that this is something that we as a team have set a goal for. It's not just for the accolades, it's because we all want to improve ourselves or something like that. But you've got to tie the what and the so what. If you're speaking up the ladder, you're speaking to senior executives, the so what might be, here's how much money we're bleeding right now. And every day we don't do something, it's going to get worse. Or here's the brick wall we're heading toward because look at this trend. But you make them very aware of this is why you should care about it. We're losing money or we're missing out on an opportunity to make more money because we're not using AI now or something like that. Headline first, the problem or the opportunity is next. At this point, you've established the need and everyone is teed up, golf analogy here, and they are ready to strike that ball and they want to fix this or change it or do something. You've made the first sale. So then you get to, I'll call it your second headline. I call it also the solution transition. So the third piece is a solution transition. It's much like a headline, but you tell them about the solution that's coming. A quick example you've seen on infomercials is they'll talk about, do you have problems with blah, blah, blah? And they go through all that. And they say, but not anymore. And then that's their solution transition. They're transitioning to the solution that they're about to give to you. So it's a silly example, but maybe that'll plant an image in everyone's mind that we can seriously follow that pattern, but we'll do it in a much more professional manner. All right. So we got headline, we have the problem or opportunity and why we should care about it. Now we have a solution transition of we've got a solution for it. We've got a plan. Zahir could say, I've got a plan on how we can approach this project, this alpha project, very different from how we approach the Genesis project. There's his solution transition. Now they're all ears. Good. We're going to do this project, and I don't want it to go like the last one did. Then he has to get into his pitch for the solution. The solution breaks down into two pieces. I call it path and resources. They need to know how are we going to do this? What's changing? What's different? And so Zahir could lay out, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan. And he could lay that piece out. And then if you're speaking up the org chart, the executives, as soon as you say, we're going to outsource this, we're going to do this, and we're going to hire this person and do that, someone's going to raise their hand and say, how much is that going to cost us? Do you have the budget for that? That's resources. So your solution needs to have a plan, a path that you're going to follow, and you need to know the resources that will be involved. Resources is more than money. It could be money, time, people, tools, software, training. It could be many things. What are you going to need in order to make that happen? And so that's the solution path and the resources. Once you offer those two pieces, then you get to the last piece. You've made your case now. You've given them the problem, the need to change. You've transitioned to a solution. You give that proposed solution. You show that you've done your homework on what it's going to take in order to get there and what we'll all have to do to invest in that. And then he has his ask at the end. That's the last piece, is you ask them to get on board. You encourage them. Now, here's one piece that I would give to Zahir because he's the leader of this group. And he specifically said, inspire. I want inspiration. Here's what you got to do then. You cannot micromanage them because according to Dan Pink, talked about the 3 things that make up motivation. That was in his book, Drive. Fantastic book. 3 things that motivate people in today's environment: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. He's got to give them some autonomy. Zahir, do not take the autonomy away and tell them, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. Get this done by this day. Do not take it to that level. Instead, what I would recommend is he says, so this is where we need to get to before we even begin this project. We've got to get to a place like here. And they'd all agree and say, we're currently right here. And then he would look at them and give them something inspirational like, I enjoy working with this team so much because each and every one of you brings a high caliber quality of work and a dedication to the mission and the goals that we set for ourselves. I am blown away every time we take on a project at how each and every one of you individually pushes the other to take it to a new level. I enjoy watching each of you get creative and innovative with the solutions that you come up with. And so here's what I'm giving to you to be done by this date so that we can begin the project in a new way. I know that you can figure it out, and I'm here to help and support you. If you need something from me, you let me know. But I know that you're going to come up with a great solution that'll get us to that starting point. And something like that. They've got to know that he believes in them and give them the autonomy to come up with their own solution. Give them the parameters of get from here to here, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it because y'all are way smarter than me. That's the general message.
And the way you framed it included all 3 of those: autonomy, mastery, and purpose, because the conversation earlier really brought in the purpose, and then you're inviting them to come up with the way in which they'll deliver it, and that's the autonomy. And then the mastery is, well, in order for you to do that, you have to tap into some mastery. You have to build up the skill to do it. And I trust you and I believe in you that you can really cultivate that kind of mastery. And so, Russ, what I want to do, I always want to ask this at the very end of each one of these conversations, because questions are what really evoke change in people. And let's say that Zahir was in the audience at one of your workshops, and let's say you're coming towards the end and he comes up to you and he tells you his story, and you listen, you acknowledge everything that he's going through, and you have a chance to ask him a question to get him to think differently and approach his communication differently. What would you start with? What would you ask him?
It's hard to come up with one because I think I'd ask a series of questions. I tend to ask a lot of questions. But my first one would say is, what is your next step for improving as a communicator and as a leader? What's your next step? Because if we don't know what our next step is, then and I wouldn't say it's to him, but I'm telling you and your listeners, if you don't know what your next step is, that's your first step. I like that. What is your next step? But I would listen, and I would let him struggle with it for a little bit if he needed to. And then once he came up with that, then I get to the deeper question. I would say something that would, first of all, I would grab onto that and affirm him, say, I love that answer. Can I ask a follow-up question? And he'd probably go, yeah. I said, why did you choose that? And I want to understand the why behind it. And here's why I'd be asking that. I want Zahir to get to his core and understand what drives him. What is his purpose? What is his purpose-driven element that drives him in everything that he does as a human? And if he doesn't know that already, I want him to discover that right now in this brief conversation that I have with him. Because once he grabs onto that, he's got a fuel source that is going to last him for the rest of his life. The difference between influence, motivation, and inspiration is that inspiration is much longer lasting. We mentioned Zig at the beginning of our conversation, so I'll go back to him. His comment on motivation is, people would ask him, does motivation last? And he said, no, it doesn't. It's just like bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. And so motivation is a daily thing you have to do. But once you find a deeper purpose, that is what truly leads more toward inspiration. And so it's a spectrum. It's not either or. It's a spectrum. And as a leader, I want every leader to understand what is at your core, what drives you, and what is your purpose. Now you tapped into that fuel source that's never going to run out.
Yeah, I love it, Russ. And I'm so grateful that you shared so many great tools and frameworks today, things that are actionable. I hope everyone listening really wrote some of these things down. I did. I always want to learn from each one of my guests, and I feel like I've learned a lot. And I know there's a lot more information where people can learn more about the work that you're doing. People can go to ispeaku.com. That's ispeaku.com. There are a lot of resources on there. And Russ, you're so kind to be able to offer 50% off to anyone who wants to tap into an 8-hour workshop where they work with an AI coach on their communication, on their ability to deliver messages in a powerful way where they get that. You were telling me about it before the recording. I was blown away.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, I would, if someone's going to go out and do it, I'd say don't miss the AI tutor. That's in there as well. But the AI coach, you give a presentation and gives you coaching and feedback. I train the coach too, so coaches like me. And the AI tutor is seriously like going to a professor that has office hours 24/7, and you just have a conversation with them. And that AI tutor has been trained on all of our materials.
Amazing. And so I'll put the link to that in the show notes along with the code, which is going to be PRES50, which we're going to be putting into the show notes.
I will say it's case sensitive. We found that out over the years. So make sure it's all caps.
All caps, PRES50, and then the link in the show notes will take you right there. Russ, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day. This was excellent. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jay.
Talk about leading by example. If you wanted to really learn how to effectively communicate and share a message with someone, just listening to Russ do it. He was the model of it in that conversation. And I'll do my best to bring it to 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways that I think are incredibly meaningful and impactful that you can take with you. The first insight is Amy. The filter that he was referring to, which was audience, message, and then you. Usually the filter that we're in is one where it's all about us. We focus on ourselves. But what he's saying is start with the audience, understanding your audience. Second, what is the message that you want them to leave with? And then we get to you. And he said, you're not last, you're just third in the priority. So that shift in filter, I think, could really be helpful in thinking through how you want to craft your messages for your people, whether this is through just a team meeting, presentation, or even some sort of public speaking. Second insight, the 4 quadrants. He talked about how the x-axis is whether people do it or don't. So if you're on the left, you don't do it. To the right, you do. And then the y-axis is how they feel. They feel great about it at the top, and they don't feel so good about it there at the bottom. In the top right corner, you have commitment. That's where you want to be, where they do it and they feel good about it. The bottom right corner, where they do it but they don't feel good about it, that's compliant. The top left corner, where they feel good but they don't do it, that's where they have some consideration, they consider it. And then the bottom left, where they don't feel good about it, they don't do it, that's conflict. And I thought that was a very, very helpful visual in thinking through what you really want is for your team to have that kind of commitment, that they are really doing it because they want to, not because you're telling them to, not because you just have the power or the authority over them. Third insight, we think in stories. We talked about patterns and the cause-effect relationship, but how we then are able to get a clear sense of cause-effect is through story. Stories are what allow for us to be able to internalize cause and effect. And then he also talked about the 3 components to every story. He said there was the hero, what it is that they want, and then the obstacle. So whenever you're tailoring your story, consider that they are the hero of the story in many of these scenarios, and that there is something that they want or that we want as a group, and then being able to acknowledge the obstacle, just like how we see that in all the movies we watch. Actionable takeaways. First of 3, spend time planning. So when you're going to craft a message and you want to really inspire people, you want to motivate them, you want to influence them, consider first where they are right now. Meet them where they are. He told that powerful story about his wife and where she was lost. Where he would start is, well, sweetheart, what do you see? What's around you? Where are you? Meet them where they are. Then begin with the end in mind. Where is it that they really want to be? What is it that they ultimately want? And then helping them to get from point A to point B. But it requires planning, premeditating this, really considering it, and even asking others if you need help. to be able to give you the answers to those questions. Second actionable takeaway, the 5 steps to being a natural storyteller. I'm going to just read them off here. The first one was give a headline. Give a headline, something that would make it relevant to them. Then second was consider the problem and the opportunity. The what and the so what. The third was the next headline or the solution transition. And here's how we're going to solve it. Then fourth is the pitch, if you will. What is the solution? And with that, he said, have a path in place as well as resources. So you've really thought it through. And then fifth is the ask. What are you asking of them? But you're doing so where you're still granting them the autonomy and you're inspiring them to action and giving them a sense of purpose in what it is that they're doing. And I like that he said these are not rules, these are tools. So use them as tools in your communication, in your presentation. Third, actionable takeaway, what's your next step? What's your next step? And then if you don't have a next step, the first step is to find out what your next step is. And then why did you choose that step? Why did you choose that step? I like that question to help you to really realize, have that self-awareness that this is the next step and here's why. So it gives you that sense of ownership and helps you to really understand what is going to be the next action and why, because you then gather some self-knowing as well. You learn a little bit more about you and why you're choosing that. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to be diving into a bit of the behind the scenes of how I go about preparing for a presentation. Very often, I am asked to present a message to a group, and I want it to be riveting. I want to inspire a group, but I want to give them actionable steps. So I have a process, and I put it all into something called the program charter. This is something I learned years ago when I was in learning and development. I've kept it with me as I am now a keynote speaker, and I'm going to walk you through my steps, the questions that I ask, how I then go about crafting a customized presentation that has proven to be very effective in seeing behavior change and being able to really land with an audience, making sure that it's relevant and they are able to recognize the what's in it for me based off of what I'm sharing. So I'll go through that on Friday. And please remember, tell us your story. We would love to help you. I'd love to be able to provide you with some free coaching. You're able to submit that through the website. Just go to jayabbasi.me/podcast. You'll see a form right there, a free form. All this is free. I just want to learn from our audience, and I want to be sure that I am crafting these stories that are relatable to you, and I'm able to help you and guide you through whatever the challenges that you have. So go to jayabbasi.me/podcast. Submit your story now, and that way I could take a look and hopefully be able to offer you that customized support. So thank you so much, and until next time, I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a great day.